The Washington Wizards have veterans with championship experience, but the question is, how much gas do they have left in the tank? We're going to grade all the OGs from this previous season. Come on, join us next on Locked On Wizards.
You are Locked On Wizards, your daily Washington Wizards podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy Brandon Scott again with my guy Abdullah. And again, we are both credentialed media members of the NBA and your host here at Locked On Wizards. So, like I said, before we get into content, though, tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. It's that easy, y'all. Come on now, rock with FanDuel. So, all right, everybody, a lot to talk about tonight. Tonight, we are going to grade the OGs. We're going to talk about Khris Middleton, Marcus Smart, Richaun Holmes, and a little bit of AG. So, to kick things off, AB got a lot of AB, AG. Kind of get into tonight's content. We're going to start with Khris Middleton. Now, look at Khris Middleton. Obviously, he was acquired at the trade deadline along with AJ Johnson and a pick swap in exchange for Kyle Kuzma. That is, our Zoolander himself. So, looking at this trade, before we're going to get into the trade, and then we're going to grade Khris Middleton. So, real quick, looking at the trade, in hindsight, what do you grade the trade real quick?
Yeah, no, I think obviously how the situation ended with Kyle Kuzma, I think it was longer here than expected. And I think just him being on off the court in the locker room being an issue, and then on the court just shot chucking did hinder the development of the young guys that we had here. So it was essential for him to be traded out of Washington. And I think a guy like Khris Middleton, for me, I give it a B, sort of to B plus, because again, you get that draft capital, but also you get a guy like Khris Middleton who's a mentor for other young guys that we have, Bob Carrington, AJ Johnson, Jordan Poole, and a guy he's still going to go out there and play even when you're on a losing team that's not going to make the playoffs. You're still going out there and contributing in many ways, and whether it was down the line clutch situations, his shot from three. He's not the same Milwaukee Bucks Khris Middleton, but he still contributed. And at the end of the day, with his championship experience playing with one of the greats of Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's bringing in some stuff that I think he's again. I think these vets that we have here in Washington, I think it's a good group, a solid group. So the fact that you got him, and it's crazy to think if you told me a couple of years from now, Khris Middleton would be a Wizard, it would be shocking. But he's still going out there and contributing. It might not be the same on the court, but he's still contributing in so many ways. And I think the Wizards. And Will Dawkins and the crew, people give him a lot of shade where it's due, but you got to give him credit for at least getting Khris Middleton for a guy like Kyle Kuzma, who was essentially out of the door.
Yeah, looking at the trade, man. Where do I grade the trade? I'm gonna give it an A straight up. Because look, you got a guy. Yeah, you're not getting your prime Khris Middleton, but you're getting a guy who's definitely has gas left in the tank and who can still be a contributor. Now, the question with that, and it's going to be a question that we're going to explore in a few minutes, is where do they place him long term? Because he does have that player option. If he enacts that player option, do they still start him? Because this draft coming up, you already got Bilal at the wing, and you're probably going to add another wing. Let's be real. Your wing and power forward are the two areas of need right now. Even though, don't be surprised if they add a guard. Let's be real. A lot of possibilities and a lot of things can happen on draft night. I'm going to give it A, because not only do you get Khris Middleton, AJ Johnson he looks like he's going to be a star. And he's a guy who only played 48 minutes overall all season long for Milwaukee. And he came right into the fold here in D.C. and was successful in a short amount of time. So, and a pick swap. So that adds to our draft asset situation. So, AB, getting to this season, where you grade him playing, what are some pros, what are some cons, and where do you grade his performance since coming over from Milwaukee?
Yeah, no, I think there were times where Khris Middleton would take some late game shots where I prefer the younger guys to take.
Yeah.
But I think with he's a guy that can easily give you 10 to 15 a night, and we've seen it from time to time again that the IQ that this man has. He's a veteran. He's a veteran for a reason. So again, I'll give him a B plus just because again you're dealing with a losing team, a team that's going to go to be in the lottery, a top 3 pick. You're still going out there and contributing when there's so many vets out there that get paid way more than him and don't want to play. So I respect Khris Middleton because not only being a good vet, but also be contributing on the court and just not being a pest in a locker room. Because again, with a young team, it's so easy to point fingers and be frustrated. But with guys like Khris Middleton, Marcus Smart being leaders on and off the court, you're heading towards the right direction.
Yeah, I agree, man. I give him an A. I mean, here's the thing. Let me go ahead and say this real quick before people start to get on us. When you look at grades, you're looking at how well did they play within the confines of their situation. When you look at the team overall, I mean, you got to look at the situation the Wizards are in. Yeah, anybody can say, oh, F, because they only won 18 games. But you got to look kind of through the lens and say, all right, where did they progress? So when you look at players, a lot of people said, "Oh, you guys are grading people too high." Well, we're grading people according to the situation they're in. If you're a rookie and you played to your draft position, what would you grade that guy? He played to the position he was drafted at, which Star did. And so I kind of had to put that disclaimer out there when it comes to grading. You're grading them based on the situation, not on the overall scope of things. Yeah, if he's a rookie, you're not going to give, you know what I mean? So I had to get that out the way. Khris Middleton gets an A because he came in and did his job. He mentored the young guys. He took not only the young guys, but players like Jordan Poole onto the side, taught them, worked with them, showed them how to be a leader. He did his job. And yeah, he's not prime Khris Middleton, because if he was, he wouldn't be in the Wizards uniform. So he came and did his job. He gets an A. I mean, he did his job. He still has some gas left in the tank. Still provided perimeter shooting. Still provided perimeter defense. I mean, that's all you could ask for. I mean, he played well within the confines of his situation. So, like I said, I'm sure, most people won't understand. Some people won't. It is what it is. So I'm with the AB. Me personally, I give him an A because I think he came in, did his job, and he did it at a high level. And again, we know what he's not. He's not prime Khris Middleton, but he still has some gas left in the tank. He ain't on E yet, AB. So let's slide into Marcus Smart. Now, Marcus Smart, AB, real quick. What was the pros and cons with his game since coming over from Memphis? And what did you grade him since coming over from the deadline?
I think, again, it goes back to situation and his ability to bring the D and DC, the tenacity. That's what we love to see, and him getting in people's faces. Again, it just goes back to you're on a losing team and you're still going out there contributing, putting your heart out there, whether if he was playing 1 minute or 30 minutes, he was going to go out there and play 110%. And that's just so much we needed here in DC for so long. Vets not here just to get paid and be lackluster. Marcus Smart goes out there and he actually contributes, whether it's offensively, defensively. And for me, I got to give him an A because, again, he's not the old Marcus Smart, and we all know that. But at the end of the day, the fact that you're still going out there contributing at this age when you're around so many young guys who are trying to learn as well, you're trying to teach them, but also trying to contribute on the court. To me, you got to give him an A for effort because at the end of the day, you're a Wizards team that you might be shipped sometime soon, maybe potentially, but you're still going out there and being a leader for these young guys. I think it's an A. And you go back to the comment where you said we're grading people, being too lenient with these grades. You brought up that great point of situation. Look at this Wizards team now compared to a year ago, where now this Wizards team, they just have so much talent. A year ago, we wouldn't have that. We wouldn't be saying that. It's crazy to say. So again, it all goes back to situation. And for Marcus Smart, trade deadline, you trading guys like Jonas Valanciunas, really solid center, and trading Kyle Kuzma, you bring in Khris Middleton and Marcus Smart. I love it.
I'm with you. To me, his name. He did what he was called to do. And again, you're not getting your prime Marcus Smart, but a guy who definitely has gas left in the tank. So before I get into my take with Marcus Smart, I pulled up Khris Middleton's stats. So look at his stats from this previous season, man. And he did play 37 games, averaging around 22.8 minutes per game, but he shot 36% from three. All right. Field goal percentage, 47.5% from field goal range. So like I said, offensively, now he did average around, if you rounded up 12 points per game, so obviously his scoring average did go down, but he's a guy who can still contribute. So kind of fast forward into Marcus Smart again. He dealt with some injuries in Memphis, and I did think that was a good move by Memphis, adding that veteran guard behind John Morant, but it just didn't work out, and it was to our advantage because since coming over to the Wizards, just like Khris Middleton, he brought experience, he brought toughness, and he brought leadership. And like I said, the one time he did that, the Bruce Leroy leap up, man. Like, he, like I said, he brings some tenacity, man. And these young guys really feed off that. These young guys have fed off Khris Middleton and Marcus Smart, their energy and their toughness, man. Because, we have some tough young guys. Bub, Keyshawn are tough. Alex Starr's tough. Jordan Poole is showing some toughness. I mean, but when you have leaders who are willing to dive for loose balls, willing to put the body in danger, practically, man. Look, when you slide, man, when you dive, you're putting your body out there. You can't help but to respect that and follow suit. So, like I said, Marcus Smart has brought a lot of energy, man, and I'm a big fan of him. Like I said, those exit interviews was actually my first time talking to him. A couple when he was actually available for media availability following games and when games I was covering. So I was actually kind of geeked to kind of talk to Marcus Smart. And like I said, cool guy off the court, man. But you see, two different type of dudes, man. Like he's level headed as far as when it comes to media, but on the court, he's fiery, man. He plays with a chip. But like I said, I'm with you. He gets an A. So real quick, let's look at his stats real quick for the previous season. So again, like Khris Middleton, his minutes went down. So a big reason why the points went down. 34 points, games played, 20 minutes per night on average, and he shot 39.3% for field goal and 34.8% from three. Now, and 9 points per game. Now, some other stats look at 1.1 steals, but we know what it is when it comes to Marcus Smart. But the biggest thing to look at is it's easy to look at his 3-point percentage and say, all right, you regress. But he was never known to be a 3-point shooter. That's one thing he said in exit interviews. Like, I'm now exploring the 3-point shooting, and he shot well from 3-point range following the trade here in DC, man. So, like I said, at what point do you stop developing? You're still getting better, even as a guy who's a veteran, a guy who's been around the block a few times in the NBA. So you always get better. That's what I'm saying. When you look at development, it's not just being young and being developed. You're constantly getting better, and especially when you look at players who played in the old era as opposed to the new. You got to adapt to the new confines of the NBA. You got guys who are shooting threes now that weren't shooting threes 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So, like I said, you're always improving and developing. So, like I said, I think we both gave high marks to Khris Middleton and Marcus Smart. But what about Richaun Holmes and a little bit of AG? So we're going to get into that. But before we do, tonight's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here. Or the year, in fact. FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Because right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you get $250 and bonus bets if your bet wins. It's that simple. I love me some FanDuel, man. And like I said, you got the NBA playoffs now in full motion. You got Major League Baseball. And look, you can make money from three-pointers to steals to assists, from home runs to RBIs to steals, and then even earn run average. FanDuel has so many ways you can bet your favorite players' props. So easy to make money, especially when you have so much sports that gives you the opportunity to make so much cash, man. So do yourself a favor. Don't miss out. Hit FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Not tomorrow, no, today. FanDuel. All right, let's get back into this thing. So, moving on to Richaun Holmes. And like I said, we're both big fans of Richaun Holmes. And most nights at the center position, he is undersized, but he plays with a chip on the shoulder. He plays with toughness, man. He's a guy who likes to battle it out in the paint, but his contract is not guaranteed. So we're going to kind of get digging in that. But before we do, AB, pros and cons with Richaun Holmes, and, what do you grade him?
Yeah, no, I think Richaun Holmes, when he's out there again, similar to Khris Middleton and Marcus Smart, bringing energy, tenacity, his ability to be a threat in the paint, is a paint beast. But also a lot of that, I think we had to talk about Tristan Vukcevic. I think with the emergence of him, a young guy that we both love, TV, there were times of the season where I was a little frustrated that Holmes was getting more minutes than TV, because we all know we can get from Richaun Holmes, but I just think when going back to the youth movement here that we have DC, you got to prioritize those guys over the vets. But again, I respect Richaun Holmes, again, being a mentor for Alex Sarr, pairing up with him in JV and also TV, and maybe bringing another center coming up in this draft. So for me, I give him a B, just because when he was going out there, whether I bring it back to the fact where if it was 1 minute or 30 minutes, he's going out there and he's putting in so much effort. And again, situation, a team that's not making the playoffs and it's a lottery team. So again, I give him a B just because energy and tenacity and him being so explosive when he goes up, that's what we need here in DC, and we need to get better in the paint. And I think Richaun Holmes is a good step to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a similar situation where you're grading him based on what he provided, man. If you're basing him on, if you're comparing him to the modern day NBA center, then he's going to get low marks. But he came in, he showed energy, he showed toughness, he played with a chip on his shoulder, he was productive. As far as paint points and paint rebounding, two areas of great needs, he played well. Now I agree with you. Early on, you kind of wanted to see a lot more minutes for Tristan Vukcevic, but like I said, to a certain degree, they were shopping Richaun Holmes. Now, with his contract not guaranteed, could he be on the move potentially? Absolutely. I mean, you always need energy. Any team needs energy, especially a playoff team. So, maybe there's a team that needs an energy guy off the second unit. Look, if I'm a playoff team, I would love to add a guy like Richaun Holmes, because you always need energy in the paint. But like I said, with his contract not guaranteed, and like I said, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But he was just energy, and like I said, that type of energy, players feed off that energy. These young guys fed off that, especially in the paint. Players like Justin Shimpany wanted to get in the paint and definitely provide, be productive in the paint, because you see guys like Richaun Holmes. If you can go in there and be productive as an undersized center, then me as a small forward, I would go in there and put in some work. So like I said, guys fed off of that energy. Now, the obvious, cons are easy, man. He's undersized at center. Obviously, he doesn't stretch the floor. He's not going to shoot three-pointers, from mid-range. You're not going to give him much of a mid-range shot. He's exclusively a lob threat and a guy who's a put-back threat. and a guy who's definitely going to be, an interior threat is offensively and defensively. But that's okay, because like I said, obviously, yeah, he doesn't fit the mold of the modern day center. But so where do I grade him? I'm gonna give him a B plus. He came in and did his job. Obvious obvious cons, man. Undersized, but to me, that's more of a pro than a con, because he played up to the size that was around. He played like 7-footer. I mean, he played tough. He played with energy, man. So I'm gonna give him a B plus because he came in and did his job. And like I said, we both said it already. When you're grading, man, you're looking at the confines of the situation they're in. And overall, as a team, yeah, they won 18 games, but there was progression, especially with the young guys. I mean, there was progression for most of the guys in this team. So if you want to look at somebody to really give a bad grade to, it's probably players who we traded away, because Johnny Davis probably doesn't get a good grade. Let's be real. Kyle Kuzma probably doesn't get an A, man. I'm just saying. So we got a good crop of players here in DC, man. A good crop of players here in DC, a good locker room. And like I said, they've turned this into a really good situation, considering 3 years ago, you had fights in the tunnel. Now you have a locker room where people enjoyed it. They want to be here. They want to play. They want to get better. They want to learn. They want to work together. So, like I said, overall, you're going to get good marks from most of these players, for both me and AB, man, because we have a good situation here. So, all right, we'll slide off to the last guy when it comes to the OGs, because we already talked about Michael Brogdon with the guards, man. So, AG, where was the pros, some cons, and how did you grade our guy? Oh, man, hold on. Let's get into the question real quick when it comes to Richaun Holmes. We kind of covered it already in the previous episode, but just for the sake of this episode, for people that this is their first video watching us, Richaun Holmes, again, AB, his contract's not guaranteed next year. So is it time for the Tristan Vukcevic show to properly start?
No, definitely. Again, it goes back to being the youth movement here. Richaun Holmes, I appreciate what he's done, but I just think when TV was given the opportunities, he produced, whether it was 1 minute or 30 minutes, like I always mention. He was going out there and producing. And Richaun Holmes, again, nothing against him, but TV's ability to score a 3-level scorer and being effective in the paint and protect the rim, can get better at that. But his frame, I just think it all checks out. Him also being younger. Appreciate Richaun Holmes for what he's done. Kind of filled this similar role that Daniel Gafford was doing here in DC, was being a lob threat, being explosive in the paint. But at the end of the day, I think TV has emerged, and I think he's proven why. Even if Alex Sarr, knocking on wood, gets injured, I think he can step up and be that guy that can produce here in DC at the center position.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's time for the TV show to go ahead and formally start. And again, it's nothing against Richaun Holmes, man, because he has produced. But, Tristan Vukcevic has shown that he's ready to take that next step. It's kind of like, before the Kyle Kuzma trade. The big reason for the trade was Bilal Coulibaly at the time was ready to take that next step when it comes to offensive load and offensive production. And obviously he has ways to go. Same thing with Tristan Vukcevic, even though you see a polished guy, 7 foot, a guy who's, definitely stretches forward from 3-point mid-range, be a rim protector, he can be a lob threat, can get active in transition. So, yeah, it's definitely time for the TV show to go ahead and start, man. All right, so let's move on to AG, Anthony Gill, that is. And it's funny, AB, because at exit interviews, I always call him a player coach, but he doesn't even want to be a coach. So that's the ironic thing about everything. But AG, to me, one of the longest tenured Wizard, but to me, one of the earliest leaders we had in as far as the Washington Wizards, man, and the guy who's been a consistent leader here. What are the pros and cons, and where do you grade AG?
You mentioned it. Longest tenured Wizard, being a leader, it's a huge pro. I think, again, when it came to his time, even when he's not playing a lot, he's still talking to the young guys in their ears, giving them advice and learning, giving some youthful advice, especially since we want these guys to be here in the long term, to build that championship squad here. And I think every team needs a guy like Anthony Gill, where he's not going to play that much, but play like Udonis Haslem will, where I'm not saying they're the same age. He's not that old, but I think his ability to contribute off the court is huge, especially when you have a coach like Ryan Keefe, who I still think can be the guy that leads the championship here in DC, but he's new. So when you have vets with the coaching staff, with the organization, telling these young guys, developing them, it's huge. And for me, again, it goes back to situation. It's so easy to be frustrated when you're in a team that you're not playing a lot of minutes. It's going to the young guys and you're losing. It's so easy to be a distraction and say, why should I even care about these young guys, But even though he's not even getting paid that much too, so you put all those in together. To me, I goes a B plus, because you're giving that effort. You're that guy that you're not playing that much, but you're still contributing a lot compared to what people think you are. And again, not many NBA fans will know about Anthony Gill. I think if you're a Wizards fan, you really know who he is, but people don't talk about how essential his role is on a team that's just so young.
Yeah, I agree, man. Looking at the grade, I'm going to try to be, looking from all angles. I mean, obviously he didn't play much. He's more of a leadership guy, more of a presence on the bench. But when he plays, he's productive. He can definitely shoot the 3-point shot. He can attack the paint, but we know he doesn't play too much. I'm going to give him B+. Obviously not everybody going to be happy, but he did his job. I mean, he was a consistent, guy who provided leadership. And yeah, he didn't play a lot, but like I said, when he played, you saw, I'm not going to say glimpses because he's not a young guy, but he can produce when called upon. When you have a lot of injuries, he's shown that he can step in play. So we know what his capabilities are. If you're looking for all-star performances, you're not going to get that. You're looking for a guy who can be a stopgap. If you're dealing with a lot of injuries, Anthony Gill can step in and help you out. So like I said, I'm going to give him a B+ because he came in and did his job, man. Cons. I mean, like I said, he's a guy who can play, he can shoot from mid-range and 3, and then he can play active in the paint. Like I said, he's one of those guys where what he provides is not really in a statistical category. Dive for loose balls, being a tough guy, doing all the small things, man. That's why I give him that grade, because if you're looking at it from a production standpoint, I mean, even when we signed him at first, he was never signed to be a starter. He wasn't even a featured role guy at the time. He was a guy who was brought in because of his experience. And obviously he won an extensive NBA experience, but he played a lot overseas and then from here to there, man. So like basketball's basketball. You play 10, 15 years overseas, you have the experience. I mean, like I said, you can say there's a difference between the NBA level and obviously other leagues, man, but basketball's basketball. I mean, you've seen a lot of guys that, struggled in the NBA, went overseas, came back a more polished player. And you see guys who struggled in the NBA and went overseas and became, Stephon Marbury is probably one of the most famous players in China, man. And he was a good NBA player, but he's a superstar in China, man. So, like, it is what it is. So,
that's the thing, B. I was going to say a lot of people, which I don't agree with when they talk about basketball, is if you're in the NBA, you're not averaging 20 points per game or doing this and that, you're a bum. But again, the more you talk about a lot where there's going to be more role players than superstars, and that's the reality of the situation. And the fact that you're in that role player mode and you're excelling, that means something, because at the end of the day, not everyone's going to be a superstar, but what's more important is playing your role. And Anthony Gill has been doing that here in DC.
Amen, my brother. I mean, look, you can argue that role players have more importance than starters. Yeah, everybody wants those starters, man. Everybody wants a starting 5 that rock this world, right? But you need your role players, man. You need your bench unit. You need these guys. And championship teams are won. They win championships with role players, man. Every great dynasty, even the Golden State Warriors, were won because of the role players. Not so much all on the shoulders of the starting 5, because of role players, man. So that, I'm with you, man. It's not always about the 25 points per game tonight score, man. It's about the guy who's willing to sacrifice his body diving for a loose ball, or the guy that brings other factors, because that's why it's a team sport. So many different factors really contribute to winning a basketball game. It's not just scoring, even though it's the most featured part of it, right? Rebounds, defense, IQ, so many different things contributing to winning a basketball game, winning a championship. So I agree 100%. And well said, AB. I agree 100%, man. So, all right, man, we're going to get into Cooper Flagg. He has formally declared for the NBA draft. So we're going to briefly talk about that and then call it a night. But before we do, we're going to take a short break, and I'm going to talk to you guys about the NBA newsletter giveaway during April. The playoffs may be out of reach this season for the Wizards, but the future is bright for the Washington Wizards. Come on now. Stay updated on all offseason news, draft coverage, and expert analysis by subscribing to Locked On Wizards newsletter. Plus, you can win big by subscribing. Subscribe between April 7th, 2025 and April 30th, 2025 for a chance to win one of these amazing prizes. A $2,500 Best Buy gift card to upgrade your sports cave. Come on now. $300 Gametime gift card, or a $200 Fanatics gift card, man. It's that easy. So get exclusive insights into free agency draft coverage and team updates delivered right to your inbox. Join Locked On Wizards for trusted coverage with me and my guy AB every single day. Subscribe to enter today by clicking the link in the description below. All right, let's get into it, AB. So before we call it a night, Cooper Flagg has officially declared for the NBA draft. So obviously we're going to get deeper into the draft process the closer we get to the draft, man. But I'm just going to gauge you real quick, AB. How excited are you that the prospect is becoming a little more realistic that we could obtain Cooper Flagg?
No, I'm definitely excited. I know a lot of people were saying he was going to stay at Duke and want to win the championship, but when you see how much the NBA is offering you when it comes to that green stuff, you can't not say no. So Cooper Flagg, I think him being a Wizard, man, to me, it's crazy that it's a possibility. It just all comes down, I think, May 12th, a couple weeks away, which is insane. That draft lottery, it's going to dictate this whole Wizards offseason. If they get pick number 1, just know we're going to be going crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot has to happen between now and that point, man. But look, one step closer to potentially obtaining Cooper Flag. Like I said, this is a loaded draft. So we're definitely going to be in a position to get Cooper Flag, Ace Belly, Dylan Harper. List goes on. Danny Wolf. This is a loaded draft. And like I said, we have the front office is just going to lead this franchise into the future. So, like I said, it's the first step. And it's going to be interesting to see how many more guys start to declare. Because, like I said, if you look at Bilal Coulibaly, we didn't know much about him until we got into the draft process and looking at Victor Wembanyama, man. So, like I said, this is where you're going to start to see a lot of these diamonds in the rough, especially with our second first-round pick, which is slated to be around 18 to 19. Like I said, we make mistakes. I'm just saying, we all know what the process of the picks are. So, I'm just going to leave it there. But we are in position to get a couple of high-impact guys in this draft, man. So I think that's the biggest emphasis to have. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and call it a night, AB. So before we roll, anything else you want to talk about, brother?
NFL draft is coming up on Thursday. It's going to be an exciting week for Brandon and I, us, our Commanders. Pick 29. It's been so long where they're going into a draft where they don't have to worry about the quarterback position. You're not even looking at that. So that's exciting. The draft lottery is coming up soon. We'll just get pick 1. It'll be sweet, man. And I think a lot of things have to fall, go in their way for them to make the plan next year. But even if they don't make the plan, just know it. You get to do a rebuild. There's going to be improvement, and I can't wait.
Oh, I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Like I said, guys, for all you Commanders fans out there, both me and AB we both do Washington Commanders content. So definitely we both will be live during the draft, man. So definitely check both of us out, man, because I know my guy AB does some good Commanders content. So definitely check my guy out. So like I said, it's exciting time for the Commanders. For your Cowboys, Eagles, and Giants, I hope you missing all your picks. I hope you guys do terrible. And I hope your fan base cries himself to sleep. So anyways, we're going to catch everybody next time. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Hail to the Wizards and peace.